Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. And yes, in fact, it is evening. Let me just adjust my volume here because I want it a little bit louder. And wow. Oh, I see. Yeah, okay. That should be it. Yeah, I think so. Yeah. There we go. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Bruce McDonald, and this is the Talamanca Review. Great to be back. Lovely visit in Panama, but there's no place like home. Such a beautiful place. A lot going on here now. I won't bore you with the details, but I mean, it's exciting. You know, the world is going on. This is not the end of the world. It's the end of the world for people who believe it's the end of the world, who have been epigenetically caught up in what is ostensibly a big lie. Misled and mistreated and abused and psychologically blackboxed for 100 generations now, or I don't know, 66 generations. And I don't know why I keep coming back to this topic, but I do, because I guess it's what I'm supposed to be talking about. Which is why I keep coming back to it. Jim and Yoshi and I went out to this cigar rolling place about 90 minutes from the town we were in, the mountain town we were in called Chica in Panama. And I found the place on Google Maps, so you just geolocate yourself, which, you can do with an Android or an Apple phone or a tablet or a computer or anything. And then you go search nearby and you go cigars. And this one place showed up where they actually use tobacco grown within the rolling shop. And you go to the rolling shop. When we showed up there, it's just a little white building. And I think I put the name of it up on some pictures on a Substack note while I was in Panama. The front door is wide open. You walk in, you can't hear a thing. It feels like the place is abandoned. And you keep walking down the hall, and you get to this area where the top half of the wall is glass, and you can look in, and at the end of that, there's a door to enter. And it's the rolling room. And there's 3 little Panamanian grandmothers sitting at desks that look like elementary school desks from the 1930s, these little wooden desks. The incline isn't as, well, yeah, it's about the same incline. And then at the bottom, they have a little lip to catch the tobacco. And they just roll the tobacco there, and that's all they do all day is roll the tobacco. And they work in silence. And you could hear a pin drop in the place. And when I walked in, I guess the woman who deals with the public got up. She looked about, hard to tell, 75, 80 years old. She was about 4'11", maybe 5 feet. Tiny little woman. Thin, gaunt. Most Panamanians are pudgy from like Gen X onwards, but she was the old generation. And she looked like she'd been working her whole life. And I said, cigarro. And she said, sí. And she looked right in my eyes and she said, $1. Because they use the US currency in Panama. And I said, okay, yo quiero 100. I want 100. And she there was no surprise on her face, despite the fact, I don't think it happens that often that people come in and order 100 cigars. And she says, I'm not sure I have 100. I said, well, I'll take whatever you have. And she ended up finding 100 cigars, freshly rolled, in, I guess, in the last week or so. Put them in 2 bags, 50 in each bag, and I said, yo puedo pagar con mi tarjeta. Can I pay with my card? And she said, no, solamente efectivo. No, only cash. So I had about 400 US on me. I pulled it out and I gave her a $100 note. And I'm gonna smoke these cigars, and I'll probably go back to vaping or try to get rid of all of this inhaling karma. That's been several generations in my family, but I don't know if I can. I mean, I love tobacco, man. And you know, there's more and more research coming out that tobacco is really good for you. Nicotine. And it kills nanotech in your blood, everything in your there's a lot of benefits to nicotine, which would certainly explain why they're looking to prohibit all nicotine in the first world now. Sometimes it's good to go somewhere for a while. Next time we go, I already bought my ticket. I'm going to go back to Panama, see Jim and Yoshi again. This time I'll bring Rosemary, because that fiasco of a Medellin situation, I lost like 650, 700 US. Kind of burns my ass. That's a new iPhone, you know. But that's life for the yellow fever vaccine. But it's nice to get out, you know, because where I live and how I live is very, very unique. I live in a very small place, a very quiet place. And I see the same people every day. I mean, there's sometimes trucks pass and you don't know who they are. They're probably related to, you know, that stuff that goes on here. And but there are neighbors too, and they never bother the Pueblo, and they're very polite, and they'll lend you anything you need if they have it, a tractor or a chainsaw, which is not normal around here. So they're widely considered good neighbors, and most of the Pueblos protect them, as does my Pueblo. And I don't think this is something that, like, the DEA will ever understand. Maybe they do. I mean, maybe they have some Latin people on their task forces that were born in Central America and now American citizens working for the DEA, but I don't think they'd be able to explain it to those meatheads. The narcos are kind of like Robin Hood figures over here. The only time the public turns on them is when they kill innocent people. And that's what did Pablo Escobar in. It was when he went to war with the Cali cartel in Bogota and started blowing up their drugstores, because they had a lot of legitimate business as well. And every time they blew up those drugstores, they killed innocent people. When they blew up the airplane to try and kill the Minister of Justice and took out like 200 innocent Colombians, that's what turns the people against you. And once you lose the people, you're done. In the narco-trafficking trade, once you lose the people, you're done. Now, I'm speaking from the Central American and the South American perspective, but experientially Central America, and perhaps anecdotally South America. Mexico seems to be another animal altogether, but that's an interesting epigenetic situation rooted in human sacrifice and bathing in blood for centuries now, Mexican culture. There's always blood in Mexican culture. Always. It makes sense too. It's a Vatican power center, and the Vatican's doing all the old blood rituals. I spend way too much time picking on the Sanhedrin. And every once in a while, I read something or I come across something and I go, oh, yeah, man, this is really, I got to say more about the Vatican. Really. I mean, in fairness, I do say it's the Abrahamic system. And I have said numerous times, if I was forced to convert and I had to choose one of the three religions, I would go with Islam. And I would live it to a T. I would follow their diet. I would pray 5 times a day and do my meditations on top of that, but I'd be a good Muslim. I don't think I'd have any real problem with it. I find it harder to fit into the Western world now, with all of its debauchery and chaos and lies and a consumer mentality that's become a kind of consciousness cancer. You consume your friend. People don't have friends anymore. They have people they sell to. I don't know how we got there here. Well, I do, but it's a long and boring podcast, and I don't want to do it, so I'm not going to do it. Kind of just friendly talk tonight, And alongside the grim reportage is the rising sun of the New World. And I can tell you that where I live, and I felt it in Panama too. Okay, you know that guy who, the ex-Green Beret, Michael Yon, who does that Substack, Michael Yon's newsletter. If you know him, you know him. If you don't, you don't. You might want to look it up. But it's not that important. But he's always going on about Panama and how it's going to break out into war, and China wants all of Panama. They don't want to give up the canal. And it's just a bunch of fear-mongering nonsense. I mean, I just spent 6 days in Panama. It's got to be one of the most peaceful places I've ever been in my life. Jim and Yoshi can leave their house and go shopping. I can't do that in Costa Rica. Rosemary and I, we have to get a sister-in-law or one of the nieces or nephews to come over and watch TV for 4 hours. It's no problem getting them because I have Starlink, right? And they all have cell phones. But we can't leave our house unattended. You can't really do that in Costa Rica. And Panama is a better place as a result of that, Very beautiful place. Very cheap, too. If things go well for me, in my endeavors, which are ongoing, new business opportunities, old businesses coming back to life, on the brink of residency, a residency that has the unique ability to allow me to work here, which you don't get with the other kind of residencies, like what they call pensionado, where you just show a pension income, or investitori, which is investore, which is an investor. You put X number of dollars into a Costa Rican bank and they give you residency. I think it's 100,000 US or something like that. It could be 60, I don't know. And you're allowed to use the money when it's in the bank. But those residencies are just to live here. My residence by matrimony will allow me to work here. And this may sound strange to a lot of you. Burned out, trying to make your monthly nut in North America, and I'm speaking to the people 50 and under, and there's a lot of you that listen to the Talamanca Review. But I want to go back to work. I got another decade of work. The only time I feel justified not working is when Spirit gives me a book to write. But I don't feel any great movement toward a book right now. And it may be that I've done everything I need to do for a few years. I might get back to writing at 65. I don't know. I'm 59 now. But I don't feel the need to write every day. It's just when a book comes, it comes, and I write it. And those 4 books I wrote up here, they all came in rapid sequence, one after the other. And I'm glad I wrote those books. It was like a PhD in multidimensional reality, including the third school, which is government consciousness, right? Intelligence consciousness, MI6, CIA, Mossad. And that was very interesting for me to learn all that stuff experientially by meeting these people, talking to them, interacting with them, osmotically feeling them, witnessing the strange events that happen around those people because they're organic portals. And their body becomes agency for things other than them to act on this dimension. It was a goldmine of learning, and I hope I've shared it all with you properly so you can understand what I came to understand. That's the whole point of being a writer, is that you're kind of like a cell tower. You get a signal and you broadcast it out to everybody else. But I kind of want to go back to work. I know it's the strangest thing. I mean, I don't need to. I make more than enough money. Got the Abaca coming back. There's a new company in town. And the tourism is looming. There's just a few knots to untie. And the future looks really good, but I don't know. I feel like just turning the farm over to my son, giving him the tourism and the Abaca, and giving him a shot at having a family with 2 or 3 kids and living a loving and peaceful life unmolested by the vicissitudes of the first world. I think every father would love to be able to do that for a son. And it's not spoiling your kids or anything like that. Believe me when I tell you, I never spoiled my son. And I don't think I ever bought him a birthday gift or a Christmas present. I told him when he was about 6. I don't believe in that. It was created by a bunch of bankers or consumer or marketing companies to get us to spend money, and it's stupid. You need something, you tell me. You need a cell phone, you tell me. I'll buy it for you. There's got to be a practical reason. But knowing what I know about Canada and what's going on, and Canada is the worst now. It is far and away the worst. They are the test case for the whole program. Canada is so brainwashed now, even if the global forces behind all of this pulled the plug and said, no, we're not going to do it. Go back to the nation state. Try to return things back to 1992. Restore that standard of living to people in the first world. Stop all this nonsense. We're not going to do it. Even if that went out, it got broadcast through their channels, I think Canada would still continue on the plan like a runaway buffalo going off a cliff. And with a decade outside the country, it's very difficult for me to understand how people can be this stupid. I have no respect for my Canadian brothers and sisters anymore, except for the ones that know what's going on and are talking about it. But the ones that don't, I don't have a clue. So as a father, getting my son out of that place and giving him a shot at a 2 or 3 kid family that has a much higher survival rate, than a North American family now. I mean, the divorce rates are through the roof. And just the peace, quiet, and beauty of running a tourism business here. It's just beautiful, Yeah. So this decade for me in Central America has been very productive. But even when I go back to work, I'm going to continue to do the business with my partner in Canada, the grant writing. And then if the money's good and it's consistent, then what I'm going to do is I think I'm going to buy a lot in Panama and build a second residence there. Why not? Why not have 2 houses? You never know. I'm kind of fallen in love with Panama. Costa Rica is physically more beautiful in every way, by the way. I don't really have the normal social sensors that most people have. I kind of just say what I'm thinking. And I don't mean to offend, but here goes. The Panamanians are a physically unattractive people. They're thick and chunky and pudgy and fat and high carbohydrate diet, and they don't put a premium on attractiveness. Costa Ricans are beautiful people. The women stay beautiful into their 50s and 60s. The women in their 30s are drop dead gorgeous. I mean, it's they take care of themselves. And the physical landscape of Costa Rica, I think, is much more beautiful than Panama. There's a lot of pluses in Costa Rica, but Costa Rica is super expensive now. It's like North America expensive. The only break I get is living for free in my earthbag house, but I don't know, maybe they'll bring land taxes in the next decade or something. This place is getting pretty savvy pretty quick. They brought a VAT tax in 2 years ago, a value-added tax. You know, well, we sometimes call them harmonized sales taxes in Australia and Canada and the United States, but it's all the same thing. It's just a flat percentage on any good or service, and they never used to have that in Costa Rica. So one can only assume that they're going to get around to reassessing everybody's property, but I don't know how that'll go. People might just... Latin countries have the ability to tell their governments to go fuck themselves. These countries are very, very different than Canada and the United States. Canada and the United States are immigrant countries. And it's very difficult for immigrants to come together and form a unified consensus against government dictates. I saw one effective example of it in Canada, where everybody came together, the Christians, the Muslims, the Sikhs, the Hindus, and it was when they went too far with that grade school sexual education agenda, when they revamped sex ed in about 2008 or 9. And it just went too far. I mean, they were teaching sodomy in the first grade. And everybody reacted and everybody unified. And it was a very hopeful moment for me. It was before I left Canada, and I remember thinking there's hope for this society. But that just goes to show you how out of touch the Canadian government is and how far they push. And I think the original intent was that the Western societies would overwhelm the spiritually grounded multi-generational societies like Sikhism, which is 500 years old, very disciplined in its customs, you know, the hijab, and not the hijab, the turban and all of these things, the beard for the men, and you know, and the Muslims as well, you know, but I don't think so. I think it's going to go the other way, and I think that the Western governments, I don't know what their original plan was. I can't think for them. But it's just going to get real crazy in the near future, because once white people are taken out of the equation, you know, you have to have kind of the law of humanity is there has to be a boss. Now, this won't persist forever. We will evolve out of this. It's our nature to evolve out of this. And when I talk about evolution, remember, it's not Darwin, not that nonsensical satanic theory that came about in 1855, which is complete bullshit. I'm talking about the evolution of consciousness, more light coming into the consciousness, more object clarity in the imagination, in the thinking, in the feeling. And when we get to a higher state of consciousness, we can live without bosses, because everybody knows what the greater good is, and everybody knows what the consequences, karmically, of breaking the greater good are. But until we get to that consciousness, we need bosses, we need leaders. Okay? And in North American society, the leaders have been largely white people. And there was no rule broken when Barack Hussein Obama got elected. Barack Hussein Obama is white. Remember, he's half black, half white, begging the question, which race does he identify with? Well, he's not getting into limousines and sucking off old black dudes, is he? He's sucking off old white dudes. So he identifies as white as much as Michael, aka Michelle, pretends she's on the Black Power trip. The worst people for the Black Power trip are entitled black women who have savings accounts through their husbands in the millions. All right? My brother married a Jamaican woman. She's all Black Power, hates Trump. She's literally, in her thinking, her being, her everything about her, she's the whitest person I know, despite the fact that she's ethnically Jamaican, racially Jamaican. She's totally white. You know, Audis and BMWs and fine shopping and her thinking. And it's this stupid little mechanism in people's minds, like when their life changes for the better, so they don't feel the guilt, because all rich people feel guilt. You know, they do. If you think they don't, you're crazy. I mean, some of them can make it look like they don't, like, what's his name? Mark Cuban seems to be having a good time. He's always laughing and smiling, the block-headed motherfucker. But they always feel a little bit of guilt. Now, maybe not the people who make the money. They're sociopaths. They're sharks, right? But the women they marry oftentimes might not be sociopaths, and they always take up the charities to try and make it look like this is a good family and we're trying to help people. But it's just guilt, right? At all the suffering in the world. It's complete nonsense. So yeah, Canada is in real trouble, man. I haven't taken a look at Australia lately, but I suspect it's the same thing. You know? So for me, I feel that the time is right to pull my family out of that so-called first world and resettle it through my son in the emerging first world. And Central America is going to go first world, as Canada and the United States, they're going second or third world. Or it depends how quickly they can kill everybody, all the people they want to kill. And they want to kill something like 200 million people, according to the Deagle.com numbers. Now, they're nowhere near that, and everybody who's ever referenced that in a podcast has to take note of that. So the only thing that could take out that many people, I don't know how many people COVID and the vaccine took out. It definitely, according to what the actuaries and the insurance companies are saying, it definitely doubled, tripled, or quadrupled the natural annual death rates in the first world countries. But it's still nowhere near the Deagle.com numbers. They need something massive to hit those numbers if they're going to do it by the end of 2025. There would have to be a nuclear bomb or something. You know, recently it's occurred to me that these people they want to get out of the United States, they want to get them out of the United States not for the reasons that people think. They want to get them out of the United States because they're not karmically connected to the mass murder that's coming. And they're actually trying to help them. I know. Bruce, where do you come up with these crazy ideas? You know, when I say something that you think is completely batshit crazy, just put it in the back of your mind and don't pass a decision on it. Don't force yourself to decide whether you believe it or not. Just go, I'm going to sit on that for a while. And generally when I say things out loud, it's because I'm inspired to, and it's because it's going to be proven true. I've been right for 5 years now. Not to be egotistical, but I mean, ever since the Light of Darkness, when, all the blood magic was explained to me and I read all the initiatory texts for Paolo Mayombe, which is a violation of their rules, by the way. They don't like it when the non-initiates read the inner texts. I read them and I studied a little bit more online, and I went, holy shit, so the Jewish temple is black magic on steroids. It's the CERN of black magic. That's what the temple is. It's basically yeah, I had a little micro power outage there that lasted for a second and shut my computer down. Yeah, and curious the timing too. But yeah, so the temple is basically the old magic from the old world, Babylonian, Sumerian, which is all extraterrestrial technology, by the way, or you can call it demonic if you want. I mean, it's all coming from the fourth dimension, and it was teaching human beings how to use that stuff was like giving an 8-year-old a loaded pistol. We're just not mature enough, right? So I started telling people, quietly, that everything that was going on in the world was related to the rebuilding of the Temple of Solomon. And here we are 5-6 years later, and it should be patently manifest to everybody. But unless you understand the rules and the game itself, like you can't sit down and enjoy football if you don't know what a down is, if you don't know what a running back is, if you don't know what a field goal punt is, if you don't know what a wide receiver is, if you don't know what the quarterback does, if you don't know what the clock means, if you don't understand how difficult it is to gain a yard in the game, if you don't study the statistics and understand the unique pairing of different teams and how the game will be won by 2 or 3 points, and there's hundreds of millions of dollars globally bet on sports books, you can't really sit down and watch football. But if you know all the rules, you know all the rules, right? You know the game, and you might enjoy watching it. And to understand what I'm talking about with the construction of the temple, you have to understand the game of life we're in now. Remember, it's a hologram, and everything that groups of people do in an individual life and collectively to move a group agenda forward, whether it be cultural, ethnic, secret society, black magic, whatever, these are generally the kinds of things that tend to persist intergenerationally. We have religious families going back, 500 years to the formation of the Church of England. We have satanic families going back 500 years to, Belgium, the Netherlands, Amsterdam, those countries. Very satanic cultures there, by the way, if you don't know. There's a reason so many of the globalist institutions are going into Belgium and Amsterdam, because that was one of the original Kabbalistic centers. And again, this is all the flowering that's coming about now was planted in a garden in which the earth was turned, fertilized, and prepped for seeds by Kabbalistic teachings. This is all Kabbalistic. Okay, and the Kabbalah it can be good or bad. There are people out there who've been lifelong Kabbalah scholars who've done a lot of good in life and have come to know some of the grace of God. I can't deny that. But what I talk about on the Talamanca Review is the dark side of Kabbalah. And it's really dark. It's darker than anything in the world. It's darker than any criminal organization. Latin American drug cartels, Japanese Yakuza, Chinese triads, Italian mafia, biker gangs like the Hells Angels. Those are bad people who consciously make a decision to live a criminal life. And I may be even, from the perspective of life and the Creator, I may be even incorrect or a bit judgmental calling them bad people. Let's just say that they decide that a criminal life is what they want to do. But there's a big difference between the darkness in criminal activity and the darkness in these organized Kabbalistic sects. And the proliferation of Kabbalistic teachings in diminished, diminutive, or weakened expression are everywhere now. And it would include, because remember, ultimately the Freemasons are an extension of the Kabbalah. The Rosicrucians are an extension of the Kabbalah. And there are good Rosicrucians, and there are bad Rosicrucians, and there are good Masons, and there are bad Masons. You know, but they all have the one thing in common, and that is magic. And magic is a manipulation of the environment. It's hacking the hologram. And I mean that literally. They do to the hologram what Mr. Robot in that TV series does to large corporate systems. They get in, penetrate, and put self-benefiting programs into the hologram. Money is one of their greatest inventions, and anybody really adept at ritual magic will make money, because money is a magical instrument. To the people, simple people, and I consider myself one of the simple people, despite my erudition in these topics and my unfoldment toward some form of grace with our Creator. I consider myself a very simple person. In many ways, I fit in here completely with these campesinos, these peasants. These are the best people I've ever lived with, even the crackheads, even though they'll rob you when you go to the store if nobody's watching your house. But that's just because they're addicts, right? So when you study these things and you get into them, what you come to realize is that the real powerful weapons in the world are the things that nobody perceives as a weapon. The very best kind of society for a magician to live in, magic with a K, ritual magician, a self-serving ritual magician, the best kind of society for a person like that to live in is a society that openly mocks the idea of magic. So you can't speak about it publicly. You look like an idiot, a superstitious fool. That's the best society for them to operate in. Again, this is an example of the ironic mirror. And high magic has played a big part in creating this black box reality we live in. It is in fact a magical construct because it takes an incredible amount of spelling to keep us tethered inside the black box, because the natural tendency of human beings is to come to awakened imagination, even if it's only on the fourth dimension. You know, as I said in yesterday's show, most natives that still live as natives live in their traditional ways. They have, at the very minimum, this bidimensional consciousness between the third and fourth dimension. Whereas in the first world, we've lost it. And if you start to get it back, they knock it out of you real quick when you go to the Sunday service at the Catholic Church or the Anglican Church or the Presbyterian Church. And I'm not trying to offend anybody by saying these things, but this is black box conditioning. None of those pulpits ever tell you the truth, even though Christ did. Do ye not know you are gods? All these things I have done, you will do and more. We're not these groveling ants, objectifying God. Have mercy on me. I'm a sinner. I'm a sinner. You're talking to yourself. You're asking yourself for mercy when you understand how the real spiritual cosmology functions. You don't have a soul, you are a soul. The adjunct to the soul is the personality. The personality ceases to exist when the body ceases to exist. Your inner person goes on to the next phase of life. Very important that you get to know your inner person, because that's the person you're going to be in the next phase of life when you let go of this body. God forbid we get pulpits that teach stuff like that. you know? God forbid indeed. I saw today a little blurb in my social media that said the age of Pisces was an age of belief and the age of Aquarius will be an age of knowledge. I'm inclined to believe that because I feel it in myself already, and I see it happening around me. Okay? But just because we go to an age of knowledge doesn't mean that evil will cease. Evil will express itself in much more potent and powerful ways. And hopefully will be, when this division between souls happens, we'll be able to get it right so that all the people who want to live at a higher vibration don't have to deal with the basest of evils, like the Italian mafia, like the Yakuza, like the triads, like the bikers, like the cartels. Let them all go and incarnate together in a world. And when you think about it, like, the way consciousness splits in an evolving planet like Earth, there's that word evolving again, but remember, when I say evolution, I always mean consciousness or spiritual evolution. I don't mean biological. Okay? Kat was right. The biggest triumph of the Satanists was getting Charles Darwin into the curriculum. Right? It's amazing how that escaped me, and she just said it in that interview, and I went, holy shit. Yeah. How come I never saw this before? Because you're not looking. Most things are right in front of you. They're right in front of you. You're just not looking. Okay? By the way, it's a sign of good tobacco that it goes out if you don't puff it for a minute or two. That's not a bad cigar. That's actually a good cigar. Tobacco's not meant to burn continuously. The reason cigarettes do is they put accelerants in them, chemical accelerants. God forbid you get to take a couple puffs of a cigarette, put it in an ashtray, it goes out, and you come back in an hour, take a couple more puffs, and you smoke 3-4 cigarettes a day. Oh, R.J. Reynolds can't have that, can they? So let's put accelerants in them. You start it, you finish it, buddy. It's like a bar fight. Now, as we go through all of these things, and I tell you all of these things on the Telemancer Review, I mean, never forget that I still find everything going on down here extremely beautiful. You know, I happened to watch about 20 or 30 minutes of a Club Random podcast, which is done by Bill Maher, of Real Time with Bill Maher on HBO. He has various guests on, and he'll sit and talk to them in his man cave there and wherever he lives in California. And depending who the guest is, they'll smoke a joint together and have a few drinks and shoot the shit for 90 minutes. And lo and behold, who does he have 2 days ago but 89-year-old Woody Allen? You know? And if you thought he was faking the depression and the horror with life, I can assure you he's not. Even at 89, he's still going on and on about what a horrible thing life is, like how do people tolerate it, and I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, man, like how do you end up in a state of mind like that? How do you end up like that, where you have no gratitude for life? Ingratitude for life is contempt for God, right? So every time, and again, this goes back to the whole Stefan Molyneux thing and the corruption of perception by reading all of these very dark Western philosophers, especially as we get into the European. The 17th century is widely considered the century of philosophy. It's when all the really profound philosophies came out. You know, it took a couple centuries after the printing press was built. Then literacy developed as a natural consequence of a printing press, because you can't sell books if people can't read, right? So it took a couple centuries, and then all the philosophy started coming out, you know, Kant and Hegel and eventually Nietzsche. and all of these philosophers, and they all uniformly agree that life is horrible and dreadful and completely full of suffering and all of these things. And I would say that, yeah, there is suffering in life. I'm not going to, put on a happy face for you here and say there's no suffering in life. But if you live it correctly and you keep searching, and part of that search is inside yourself, you'll come to realize that suffering is a blessing and that it transforms you, and that transformation was necessary. And it was a consciousness growing pain, just like your muscles and bones ache when you're, 12 to 15, when if you're going to be 6'4", you're going to hit that 6'4" by about 16 years old. But when you were 12, you were still only 5 feet or 5 feet too tall. That's a lot of growing in a year and a half. You could almost, and so you get growing pains. They're actual pains from growing very quickly. And there is a growing pain in consciousness as well. And it's suffering. And suffering is the shedding of your false beliefs. And there's no happiness to be found in this world until you can find happiness in the moment. And your best way of achieving that is to take as much direct responsibility in crafting and building your life as you can. If you just take the life they're giving, you are literally signing up for a lifetime of suffering. Because all of the salaries are indexed to survival. And so you might be able to put up a pretense for 2 or 3 decades like you're normal. Look at this, we have 2 cars in our garage and we have a house. But the amount of worry and preoccupation and subservience and subordination of the soul that goes into surviving in these institutions, whether they be education or medicine or finance or what have you, or the sort of ruthlessness that goes along with sales culture, no matter how good the product you're selling is, it dampens the soul. It destroys the soul. And when the soul is destroyed, the soul can't be destroyed. But what happens is perception disconnects from the soul. And you start to believe that you're the personality. And boy, that's when all the suffering starts. And that's when you think you have a mental illness. And that's where you think it might not be a bad idea to get yourself on some pharmaceuticals. And that's when you're really lost, because then you're chemically locked into your depression. And then you're going to have a chemical withdrawal when you come off those pills. And then the people who prescribed you the pills, the doctors, they're going crazy because what they're doing is wrong and they have to be karmically punished for it. But they never make the connection spiritually, so they can't figure out what's wrong with them. They go crazy, they commit suicide, or they go stark raving fucking nuts. Or they end up mumbling about what a horrible thing life is, like Woody Allen. Can you imagine a guy like Woody Allen, the life he's had? All the beautiful women he's been with, the movies, the notoriety, traveling around the world. And that fucking little bum has got the temerity to go on a show at 89 and say that life is so horrible for him, he's always more or less suicidal. Well, you're 89 now, Woody, so I think we can fairly assume you're not going to kill yourself, so stop talking about it. People are full of shit. Completely and utterly full of shit. I had a whole program planned tonight. Literally. I think it's like, let me just check here. If I have Microsoft Word open. Oh, no, I don't, but let me check here. It's like a 9-page document. I had a really organized podcast planned for tonight, but I just didn't get around to it. And I was going to talk about, I asked Gemini AI to give me a list of all the times the Israelites had been commanded by their God to genocide a people or to destroy another people. And I got a preliminary report, and then there's a thing called research on Gemini where you can go into much deeper research, and it'll take about 15 minutes. You go on and you do something else, watch a YouTube video or something, and then you'll hear this ding on your computer, on your cell phone, on your iPad. Your Gemini report is available. And it cranked out a 14-page report. And maybe I'll do it tomorrow because I'm pretty much done this podcast in terms of my usual time limit today. But this is called a multi-layered analysis of the biblical commands for utter destruction. Okay? And it's a fascinating topic, and a little voice in my head just said to me today, hey, look this up and do a podcast on it. And I was going to do the briefest of interviews and get to this document, and I thought I might be able to get it covered in an hour and 15 minutes if I highlighted it. And no, I just ended up being a talking podcast today. So I was fooling around on the computer today, and I produced a couple really good high-end EPUBs for God as an Economist and The Stolen Child. And I'd love to do a book club for one or both of these books. So if anybody would like to read any of my literary fiction, and it's worth reading, and I'm not being immodest, let me know, and I'll send you one of the books, and you can read it on your tablet or your phone. And then if 10 or 12 people get together, then maybe we can have a book club, right? And I would like that quite a bit. I hope I get another book in the near future, but I'm not sure it's going to happen. I think everything that I needed to say has been said now. And I think that it's time for me to put my mind to very practical things. Batten the hatches, as they say, because I think the storm is almost upon us, folks. And I don't mean to slip back into yesterday's podcast, Grim Reportage, but I think by the end of September, something serious is going to be upon us. October is the harvest month. Okay, so when you go back to the ancient calendar, that's why we have Halloween was really an end of the growing season, and you had all your crops harvested by end of October because the ground starts to freeze in November. There's a big celebration at the end of October. It's the harvest celebration, right? The end of sort of like the high point of the fall. I'm not sure if it's an equinox or what have you. And it was considered pagan, and so the holiday was sort of stamped out in some measure by the Vatican. And now retarded American evangelicals are going around saying that Halloween is demonic. Everything is demonic to these fuckers. If they ever actually encountered a demon, they'd be institutionalized. Weak-ass motherfuckers that they are. So getting back to the idea, though, the harvest, so if there's no harvest, there's consequence. This is the thing about October, right? You go back to the Wicker Man and all of these ancient Druidic rituals and all of these ancient Hebrew and Canaanite and Sumerian and Babylonian, Assyrian rituals from the pre-modern world. And they all involved a ritual sacrifice of potent figures in government. Because it was in the past, to lead, the people had to believe that you had divine authority. And if the crop failed, it proved to them that you did not have a connection with God or the gods. Therefore, you were a fraud. And because they or their children were going to be severely malnourished or possibly die through the long, cold winter because the harvest was not sufficient to get them through the 4 or 5 months of winter, they would take that wrath out on the king and the agents of the king. This is the way the old system worked. And the old system never really went away. You see, nothing ever really goes away. You know, you can move into a home in London and peel off the wallpaper and see the old wallpaper from 50 years ago underneath it. And it's the same thing with life and the rituals we create. Because there's only one system, and it's the natural system, and on Earth it's the seasons. And the seasons have consequence. And this has been a bad season for the United States, and the economic consequences are going to be coming in what I would call a bad report at the end of October. And things are going to get hairy. And I think as a diversion tactic, Europe and possibly America are going to go to war, because war is the ultimate diversion. And it saves the king's head, because the modern king, is a phony. They don't really want the responsibility of leading, because they don't have the capacity to lead. So when reality and the timeline calls their bluff, they distract everybody. That's what they do. So I think that the harvest is going to be quite something. I think that's about enough for today. I think I'm going to call this podcast The Rambling Man. I'm Bruce McDonald, and this has been the Talamanca Review.